Hello, I'm Kathryn Wagner, and I'm a social worker at the Wellness Collaborative in Guelph, Ontario. And I'm introducing today Janet Griffin, who is a registered psychotherapist and a recreation therapist working with survivors of psychological trauma. And she's going to talk to us today about Zentangling. So Janet, tell us about what Zentangling is.
Well, Zentangling is a really great activity I got involved in a couple years ago. I really want to be clear that I'm not a certified Zentangle teacher and will certainly provide resources for folks who are interested in taking a class from a certified Zentangle teacher. My whole goal is just to make people aware of it as an option, as a really great activity for learning how to feel calm and relaxed, for managing stress, and for creating some really beautiful pieces of artwork, and especially for those of us who don't feel like they're very artistic. And I unequivocally fall into that category.
I don't think so, but can you show us an example of what it is?
Sure. So Zentangling is really a use of very basic pen strokes that are done repeatedly. And those pen strokes that are done repeatedly, when we're working with that intentional, mindful practice, create some really unique pieces of artwork. So the important thing I think to understand with Zentangling is that it's not meant to look like anything. It's not meant to look like an image. It's really meant to really, in my own experience and my own belief, is really meant to be more about the process of learning how to be intentional about the specific pen strokes that we're doing. So really it entails 5 basic pen strokes. They look like this.
Yeah, I can see it.
So as long as we can draw the crescent moon, a straight line, a squiggly line, a circle, and a dot, we can do all of the different Zentangles. And so really what it is about repeating those pen strokes over and over again and combining them in different ways to be able to create some neat artwork. So an example of a Zentangle I created with those same pen strokes. I don't know if that's visible.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And again, it's not meant to look like anything. Another example could be something like this. They all turn out different because I'm never really quite sure what they look like before I start. So it's always a surprise. When I get to the end, I think, wow, that's how that turned out. So I never have an idea before I go in, and I have no idea what they look like when I'm done, until I'm done.
Very much like life in general.
Right.
Show us what tools you use.
So what I love about Zentangling, one of the many things I love about it, is it's portable and it's easy, and it doesn't require a lot to be able to enjoy it. Basically, we use paper, a pen, a pencil, and a blending stump. Pens that are really nice to use. This is a Micron 01, which really means it's very fine tipped, very fine point. It's archival ink, so it doesn't fade, and it's very, very fine. You can get different thicknesses, and I use different thicknesses depending on how much shading I would like to do. In Zentangling, they use what they call a tile, which is a square piece of paper that's cut 3.5 by 3.5. You can order specific Zentangle paper. I tend to use what I have on hand, and especially during this time when we're not able to get out very easily, you can just use any paper. They create the tiles because they often will put the tiles together to create a mosaic. I use just a regular pencil and this blending stump, which is essentially rolled up piece of paper that when you use the pencil for shading, you can blend, and it creates some really neat effects to the things that it creates. In fact, when you add the shading, it will really take the image to another level, which is really kind of nice.
Awesome, thank you. And so my question is, how could someone use this to help them to relax or manage stress and anxiety?
I really liken this process to mindfulness practice. And where in mindfulness practice, the goal really is to pay attention on purpose, non-judgmentally. And that we're paying attention, and oftentimes in meditation we use our breath, which is with us at all times. It's the repeated practice of noticing in the in and the out breath as you do that. Zentangling, in my own opinion, is very similar, where we're intentionally paying attention to those very basic pen strokes deliberately, non-judgmentally. And it's that focus of that allows our brain to really zero in on the task at hand. So when we're engaged in Zentangling as a way of coping and managing stress, it allows the brain to focus specifically on the task that we're doing. And as we learn how to focus on the task and really become absorbed in that, it doesn't leave a lot of room for other thoughts that may be more distressing. So it gives us a reprieve from maybe a cycle of distressing thoughts or ruminative type of thinking. So in that way, it's a really beautiful mental grounding strategy. And when our mind is focused just on the task, then it really can help to create a sense of calm and a sense of relaxation, and then a sense of confidence and pride when we see the things that we can create, which are oftentimes really surprising to folks. So when I've introduced this to clients and patients I work with, consistently what I get are people saying, I had no idea that Zentangling even existed, and I had no idea that I could create this. Does this ever look amazing? I didn't think I could do that when you first showed me. And so then I make sure that everybody's just got lots of resources about where to take a class with a certified Zentangle teacher to really learn the philosophies and the methods that they teach. It's a fabulous activity that can be accessible at any time and anywhere. It can really help. What I love about it in terms of the focused attention is that there's no right or wrong way to do it. So even when you make mistakes, they actually kind of pave the pathway for new tangles. And then the thing that turns out to be the mistake actually becomes something intentional later because we can work with that. So like in life, we're not able to erase things that we've done. We just work with what we have. So it grows and it morphs and it changes as we progress, which is one of the many things that I just love about it.
I love that. That's awesome.
I do too.
Show us how you would get started on one?
Yes. So if you take a class, they'll generally give you a tile, they call it, again, 3.5 by 3.5. You can start with something small like this. It feels a little more contained. As you can see with some of the ones in the book that I've done, I use them on a lot bigger piece of paper. But sometimes starting on a tile like this can feel more doable. Generally, if you take a class, they'll invite you to set a boundary or a limit. So I often will use a lot of parallels to life in general, to Zentangling, that we all need boundaries. We all need limits to know what we're going to work in. So like Zentangling, I may create a boundary by joining a line, how wavy or straight, to 4 dots that I put in the corner. That creates the context. In Zentangling, they create what they call a string, which essentially just divides this area in the boundary into smaller parts. A string can be very organic and swirly, and it just divides it into smaller parts. So like in life, I think when we break things down into smaller pieces, it becomes more manageable. So once our string is in place and it's broken down this space into smaller pieces, then we can turn it in any way because there's no up, there's no down. We're always working with getting perspective, like in life. So if I'm always trying to find a different perspective, it always changes what I'm working with. So then I would choose any little section that I've created and I'd start with this repeated pattern. And it just evolves from there. Then when you feel like that's done enough, then you'd turn your squares around and you'd find another section to work in and you'd start another group of tangles.
So how do you know what repeated pattern to use?
Well, I think that's the beauty of it. It's whatever you feel like doing. So what I love about it is that 3 or 4 people could choose exactly the same pen stroke, let's say the crescent moon. And depending on the nature of their string design, that exact same one will look very different for everybody who does it. So if we learn 4 different tangles and you put them all together, all 4 people's end result will look different. So what I always encourage people to do is if they're interested, not only in just taking a class and learning more of the philosophy behind it, but if you're just kind of starting at home, start with any one repeated pattern and just get really familiar with it until that's really comfortable. And there are so many variations to work with, even with just a single pen stroke. So it's a great way to get started just with any, and you just keep repeating it. And what I love about it, in addition, is that you start off and at the first it may not look all that impressive, and then you repeat the pen stroke in different ways and it adds another layer. You repeat the pen stroke in another way and it adds another layer. By the time you're finished, it's way more layered and complex. And again, I liken that to skills around meditation and paying attention to breathing. If I'm paying attention to breathing for 3 minutes, I have one level of awareness. If I'm practicing that every day and I'm starting to develop that practice and I'm repeating it more and more, so now I'm up to 20 minutes, it deepens the understanding of that particular skill. And I find the same thing happens with these repeated pen strokes. The first layer, it looks okay. When you repeat it and you repeat it and you repeat it, it layers it to create a whole different finished product. So I think very much in life, it's the same way. The more we add to it, the more layered it becomes.
Awesome. Can you show it again? So after you said all that, I think I'd like to see one of the tangles again.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's just, and this is just an example of one I've created. It doesn't mean that's they all look like.
Yeah, well, every
different tangles.
Different.
Yes, everyone looks very different, even though I'm using the same pen strokes.
Wow.
And if I have one like this one, we're talking about the crescent moon. That's one way a crescent moon can look. If I took that same crescent moon and went on the outside of that shape instead of the inside, I'll get an entirely different look.
Right. Yeah. Awesome.
And what I love about it is you do not have to be an artist. As long as you can draw a circle or a straight line or a crescent moon, you're well on your way.
Now, how could people use it with their children during pandemic homeschooling?
Well, I know that in some schools, they're already teaching it to children, which is really teaching children how to focus their attention. And I really believe that's a skill set that all of humanity could really benefit from, learning how to really focus, and especially children. And in fact, when I took my first Zentangling class, I brought my children with me.
Uh-huh.
And we all enjoyed it together. And again, what I love about it is that it's very simple. You do not have to have advanced artistic capacity to be able to do these. As long as your child can hold a pen, they can start. So helping a child to really focus their attention, and it also gives, I believe, a child and adults a sense of control over what they're doing. And especially now with all this pandemic stress, when so much is out of our control, even just giving yourself a few moments in a day to do something where you're in complete control and attending to the deliberate actions of your pen stroke gives us a little bit of a break and brings us into a realm of something that we are controlling, we are paying attention to. And then we become confident in our capacity to do that, which builds a sense of mastery, builds confidence, creates a sense of calm, and creates a beautiful sense of accomplishment in our own capacity to make something gorgeous.
And I know you use this in therapy as a grounding tool also, right?
Yes. So what I think might be really helpful, and I know it certainly has been for patients I work with, is I'll introduce this activity. I will give them all sorts of resources of where to learn more about it, which I will certainly make sure is provided at the end of this video. What I find that patients who I work with who have experienced psychological trauma, often one of the many things the folks I work with struggle with is a very strong inner critic. So when a Zentangle is started, I hear people having a really hard time tolerating that what they're doing is good enough. And the self-critic speaks really loud, says that what I'm doing isn't good, and people can get frustrated and want to stop. 2 things have been helpful. 3 things I think have been helpful, actually. One is I remind people this is not an art class, that this is just an exercise in being present with the pen mark that is you're making deliberately on the paper. This is not about producing an outcome. This is just learning how to pay attention. The second thing that's really helpful, I think, for folks is that there is no right or wrong. You can't do it wrong. Whatever you put down, if you're attending to it, is done correctly. And that when people have done this particular exercise, I find 3 the magic number. By the 3rd time, I hear people say, holy smokes, that was so much more easy for me to do it. So when they stuck with it, they notice the benefit themselves. So if people shy away from it at the onset because they're anxious about their self-critic, please don't take that as evidence that this isn't working. My encouragement is for folks to try it a few times. Again, the magic number seems to be 3. Many people I've worked with said by the 3rd time I made this, wow, I was really able to focus so much more effectively than at the onset. And then the other beautiful thing is that when people's self-critic speaks loud and they put their tangle away, I always encourage them not to throw it out. When they bring it back, they go, I think that I did a better job than I thought when I first started. It's like when they give themselves a day or two, the critic forgets and stops speaking. And when they revisit it, they have a different assessment of it. So of course, on so many levels with therapy, I'd work with that as well. How about if we just give ourselves space? So I think those pieces are really important, that for folks who have high anxiety, practicing activities that allow you to really focus can be so helpful at giving a respite from the anxiety that comes from distressing thoughts that swirl around in the head.
Awesome. That's awesome. Is there anything else you want to say before we talk about resources?
Oh, before I talk about resources. I think that's it. Again, my goal is just to let people know this exists. So many folks that I work with aren't even aware of it. So I'm really glad that you gave us platforms we can let people know where to go to learn more. And maybe that'll be the segue. I could suggest that if folks visit a website, Zentangle.com, you can learn more about who's created it, their methods, their philosophies, their teaching methods, which I really think deepen the understanding. It's more than just creating the tangles. There's so much more to it. Taking a class by a certified Zentangle teacher, if you have no idea where to go to get a class taught by a certified Zentangle teacher, they have all that information on the Zentangle.com website. I've been on Pinterest to get ideas. There's a whole bunch of free tangle patterns accessible on their website and all over the internet. There's a lot of books available on Zentangling. I've bought several for patients that I work with, again, to help them develop that skill for themselves. Many sign them out from the library. So there's several places to get more information about that and to get ideas. And there's a whole community of people who Zentangle when you go online with that particular Zentangle.com, and to be a part of something much bigger.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Janet, for giving us all this information. And I know that you do great work with the patients that you work with and include this in the work that you do with them. There's so much more to learn when you get right into it, isn't there?
There really is. It's very much parallel to larger life lessons, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks so much for doing this. And we'll post it to the Wellness Collaborative YouTube, what do you call that, channel. Thanks,
well, it's wonderful. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.